The reason that I was thinking about Jordan Peterson is that I saw him.
He cried.
Well, probably while he was composing the tweet, he cried, but the cry is not captured in the tweet itself. But yeah, he had. So he posted this a few hours ago. So this is a Sports Illustrated cover. And he says, sorry, not beautiful, and no amount of authoritarian tolerance is going to change that.
Oh, my God. My God. Oh, my God. I mean, this guy, first off, we should just say, and generally, you know, when I make this assessment, I sort of back off. But this guy is having a rolling, nervous, emotional breakdown. I mean, we are watching someone who I think is psychologically disturbed, and he's making too much money, or he's for other people, or he has this dynamic within his family where nobody's able to, you know, and we see this all the time, right? Dianne Feinstein's walking around the sun. She has no idea where she is. No one seems to be saying anything to her. But I mean, this is what's going on with this guy. He is having, I can only imagine what he says to himself when he looks in the mirror. Like he really, the idea that it's one thing to say like, okay, not my taste.
Sure.
Right. Like, I mean, about anybody, you know, it's another to say, because it's not my taste, it's authoritarian. I mean, the fact of the matter is, like, there is a lot of people who will find that woman attractive. And the idea that if it's not his taste, it's suddenly authoritarian. It is.
Because they're trying to force him to find her attractive.
It's just
by putting her on the cover.
It's just sheer, like, that's why they've been doing this for whatever 50 years of covers, is so that he has something to masturbate to. And if it's not something that is his taste, well, Brave New World, here we are, 1984. We're being told that the swimsuit edition, which has always been the thing that I've masturbated to, is not. And so now we're living, this is like the Holocaust, and this is like the Nazis and the gulags. And and it's so self-evident that it's almost like, you know, he's just like throwing it, like, no rationale, just like, everybody will get this. I'm just
Yeah, so in response to it, this person Vosh responds and says, among other things, this is like the second tweet, but he says, also authoritarian, chunky women on magazine covers, you sound like a parody of you, to which his response is, it is a conscious progressive attempt to manipulate and retool the notion of beauty, reliant on the idiot philosophy that such preferences are learned and properly changed by those who know better, but don't let the facts stop you.
I mean, this guy presents himself as an academic. Has he seen any sort of like art through the ages? Like, I mean, you don't have to go far back in our history to find times where women who are Zoftig are considered the pinnacle of beauty. I mean, has he ever cracked open?
Especially given Jordan Peterson's interest in, like, you know, ancient mythology and archetypes and all of that stuff, you'd think, like, I mean, like, well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, like that's like the image of like old, like, fertility goddess statues and stuff like that, right? Like, you know, like, this is the only reason anybody would have any reaction to this other than his is just progressive manipulation.
It's stunning. It's honestly like, if someone came out and said, so, hey, I am a performance artist and I have a 7th grade son, and I created this fictional character, Jordan Peterson, and I've been actually just having the 7th grader react to stuff. And, you know, he's not a particularly precocious kid. It's just like, and, you know, there's some behavioral issues, but everything he says, I then filter through the character Jordan Peterson. That would be the best explanation for all of it. right? Like, I mean, this guy's an academic. Has he never taken like an art survey course, like a 101 art survey course? Just to get a sense of like what the changing, visions of what constitute beauty over the course of, you don't have to go back that far, a couple hundred years. And, but yes, you can go back to the Greeks. And I mean, it's stunning to me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Sorry, what were you going to say?
Well, this has been a problem. Like this dynamic where a supposed conservative intellectual has this wide open playing field because actual intellectuals will not engage him because they're like, I mean, actual intellectuals look at Jordan Peterson as if he's Steven Crowder. And however, there's this huge swath of people who are like, he's an intellectual, like even sometimes columnists at the New York Times. And they get presented in this way. And the problem is like, can you imagine going to like, I don't know, a professor who's, like, I am an art history professor. I have literally written a thesis on the, one of the probably hundreds of theses, but mine was very narrow. I was looking at like the shape of elbows in the history of what constitutes beauty, with women and men, like just the shape of elbows or something, right. Just to, and they're not going to engage with a guy like Peterson because they're like, are you serious? I mean, and I think that's better. I mean, like, sure. You're a professor and there are history professors starting to engage in it. And I think like, scientists are starting to, but we are literally decades behind them in sort of like public intellectuals, because he's a joke. He's a joke. He's a joke.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely true. I mean, I think that, but I think it's a problem, right? That like what you're talking about, I think is a real issue because, like that is a common attitude. Like I had, I was just in Canada, to like give a talk, and like afterwards, like at the bar afterwards, there's somebody who's like a graduate student, I think, who was like, why did you debate Charlie Kirk? Like why is that a worthwhile thing, to do? He's such an idiot, right? And it's like, I mean, I don't disagree with the premise, right? Like he is an idiot.
He is
right?
an idiot.
But he's also an incredibly influential idiot.
That is, I mean, this has been, and I mean, it's changed a little bit, but when the Air America really struggled in many ways to get funding, and not just funding. Like we would put people on and we would push their book to #1 on Amazon. Like we did that multiple times with different books. And we were the only game in town. If you were a writer at the Nation magazine or anywhere, right? I mean, any of the big magazines at that time were, and that were on the left. And there was always this sort of like, I mean, fortunately from my perspective, like I had just come from, I don't know, directing Gary Busey. And there is nothing more sort of degrading or humiliating than being engaged in something like that. So it wasn't, it was not something that I took personally. I mean, I think I've always been fortunate to have my pedigree be like, I dropped out of law school and then did sitcoms. And so right. Like, I don't have a huge investment in, but there were times where I was like, it is in their best interest, these magazines, to like hype us. And frankly, shows like yours and shows like mine and even, like not even, I mean, all of these online things, regardless of what you think about them, it's in their interests to hype us so that when they come on and we interview them, it spreads their word more. And that doesn't exist in our world. It just doesn't, because, and I think part of it is there's not as much money involved, and there's a sort of like, we don't have like people who are just turning on the spigots and pouring sort of like capital into our endeavors. And that creates a sort of like a competitiveness, but also B, it creates a compensatory structure that is not necessarily about money, but about like some measure of respect and status within the academia or within the journalism world. And I think that's much less than it used to be in many respects, because like people got to go out and do Substacks, and people got to do, everybody's doing a podcast. And so it sort of becomes a great equalizer. But that is if we were on the right, you would have some like sinecure from, I don't know, Hillsdale College, where, some no-show job, or you'd be writing for townhall.com or Breitbart, whatever it is, at some like completely absurd rate where you're getting paid like, I don't know, $500 per word or, some absurd like that. And, but that's not the world we live in. I don't know how I got off on that tangent, but
no, but I think that's absolutely right. And I do want to get back to that, because it's going to be relevant to what we're going to turn to later in the segment. But I do want to say before we stop talking about Jordan Peterson, lest anybody accuse us of not engaging with his contributions that are more substantive than liberals are trying to brainwash him into finding that woman attractive. He's, there's something. So that was from today. This is from a little while back, but I do think it's okay. Here's the setup. So at the time, the president tweeted, "In America, healthcare should be a right, not a privilege," which is a nice thing to tweet. I wish he act as if he believed that, but separate subjects.
Right.
So Peterson, interestingly enough, because he's a Canadian, responds, "Nothing that someone else is required to provide can be a right."
Well, that's not true, actually. In fact, almost the definition of a right imposes a duty on someone else, right? I mean, so he's wrong as a factual, matter. I mean, if it's a right for him to own property, it inhibits it means that I can't walk on his property or take it and sell it. I mean, if like with every right, there is also a duty, and A and B, like, rights do not exist in nature. They don't, unless you're arguing on religious terms, and they are created by society.
Yeah, I mean, you could say it's unjust for a society not to grant some right, but if so, right, like, then I don't know why, so-called positive rights, rights to healthcare in that example, you'd have to have some reason why it just doesn't make sense a priori to say that you could, you have a right, given that you have a society that has the capacity to give everybody healthcare. Like, why it wouldn't make sense to say that it's unjust not to, not to have that provided, right? I mean, like, that's a substantive question, and it seems like Peterson's just kind of tried to say, try to say that there's something about like the definition of a right that.
Well, that's my point. Is that like there is no? It's all subjective. It really is. Your rights are decided by society. That is, and we can argue that the rights that are denied people are unjust or just, but it's all ultimately like there is no rights don't exist in a vacuum. They just don't, like, I mean, if we were to, they simply don't. They are constructs that we have created. And we can argue that, some are inalienable, but they were not inalienable until we as a society decided they were inalienable. And in fact, you can look at other societies and see that maybe they are alienable. And so he's just an ideologue.
Yeah, I mean, inalienable certainly can't mean that they can't be taken away, because clearly they can be. They like it again. It might be wrong to take them away, but that's
exactly. It's just
that's a substantive question, right? That's you can't just say that, like, you're saying something that just doesn't make sense given the meaning of the word right. And it's a weird thing, right? Because this is like a very like old school libertarian kind of thing to say for Jordan Peterson.
Yes, he seems to be struggling to find, and this is like the last refuge, right? And this is the cul-de-sac he ends up in, I think. I mean, because his shtick is over, and libertarianism, I think, dovetails nicely with his sort of self-help program that he has. But I was just going to say, you may actually know better than I, but there has been at least 2 occasions, maybe 3 or 4 over the years when I've debated libertarians, where it does get down to like, well, the problem is the American people just don't understand, don't understand this. Like it's like where we say like, well, the American public actually thinks it should be right or shouldn't. Well, they're wrong. And it gets to the point where they realize like they have to concede, oh yes, my program is really, really unpopular. And that's a problem with the voters. And the next logical step that they sort of half take is that we should impose this on them. But of course, this bumps up with their sort of, 100% liberty t-shirt that they're wearing or whatever it is. And,
I think if you read the fine print of the t-shirt, it's just that like liberty can't mean anything except for property rights, right? Like it certainly doesn't include something like the right of everybody to decide what kind of society they want to live in.
There's an asterisk that if you look under the seam down at the bottom, it says, I'm actually a Straussian.
You have been watching free public content from Give Them an Argument. To access every single episode of the show, the main show on Monday nights, all of the streams, all of the debate breakdowns, all of the patron-exclusive post-games on Monday nights, all of the patron-exclusive bonus episodes every week, and much, much more, go to patreon.com/Ben Burgis. I cannot resist ending this with, don't be foolish.